Nestled in the heart of a dense forest, hidden from the crumbling cities and the chaos beyond, Camp Everest stood as a fragile sanctuary. Its walls, made of scavenged metal sheets and reinforced timber, held back the nightmares that roamed the world outside, zombies, once human, now hollow husks driven by an insatiable hunger. The camp wasn't large. Maybe 100 souls called it home, survivors, scavengers, families, soldiers turned guardians. There were gardens growing in bathtub planters, a communal mess hall fashioned out of an abandoned ranger station, and watchtowers with rotating shifts. Hope was rare in this world, but inside Everest, it still flickered. A young woman named Mara sat atop the eastern tower, binoculars pressed to her eyes. Her father, once a commander in the army, had helped fortify the camp before falling ill. Now, she kept his post. Calm winds whispered through the trees as she scanned the horizon. No movement. That should have been a good thing. But something felt wrong. Below, Jonas, the camp mechanic, was elbow-deep in a rusted generator. He was wiry and quiet, a thinker more than a talker. He lived by one rule: everything gives a warning, if you're listening. And today, the generator was too quiet. It hummed, but not the way it used to. Something was draining it. Across camp, Eli, the head of security, was running drills with the younger guards. Former SWAT, Eli was grizzled but sharp, the kind of man who didn't believe in gut feelings, unless they came from people he trusted. And Mara, he trusted like a daughter. "Report, tower," he called up, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Nothing yet," Mara answered, her voice tight. But the silence, "It's not right." He nodded once and walked away, but her words stayed with him. That night, under the cold gaze of a half-moon, the silence grew thicker. Even the crickets had stopped singing. In the watchtower, Mara spotted it, just for a second. A figure, still as stone, halfway between the tree line and the outer fence. She narrowed her eyes, focusing through the binoculars. Then it was gone. She sounded the alarm. Camp lights flared. Guards took positions. Mothers pulled their children into underground shelters. But nothing came. No noise. No movement. Just the wind and the trees. Eli climbed the tower. "You sure?" "I saw it," she insisted, heart racing. "It didn't move like a stray. It was watching." "You think it was a scout?" he asked, though he didn't like the implication. Zombies didn't scout. They swarmed. They roamed. "I don't know. But I've never seen one just stand there." Eli scanned the dark beyond the fence. "We'll double shifts tonight." "You did good." Jonas, now at the perimeter fence, tapped one of the solar floodlights. The battery readout blinked red. Low power. Too low for a system that should have been at full charge. He walked back to the command tent and reported what he'd found. The camp's power had been tampered with. Someone had been draining the batteries, deliberately. Eli listened, arms folded. "You're saying we have a saboteur?" "Or someone outside knows how our system works," Jonas replied. "Either way, someone wants us in the dark." At dawn, the camp held a meeting in the open yard. Murmurs filled the air, anxiety heavy on every face. People looked to Mara, to Eli, for answers. Eli stood on the steps of the mess hall, voice booming. "Last night, we had a breach of security. No one was hurt, but something, or someone, was at our fence. And our power systems were compromised. We are not safe." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "We will not panic," he continued. "We will prepare. We'll reinforce the perimeter. Ration power. Tighten shifts. Until we know who or what we're dealing with, trust no one." That was when Mara noticed something strange. A young boy, maybe 11, standing at the edge of the crowd. She didn't recognize him. And she knew everyone in the camp. He met her eyes, and smiled. But there was something off about it. Too calm. Too knowing. She moved toward him, but he vanished between tents before she could speak. Later, Jonas found boot prints outside the fence, human, not undead, and leading into the woods, not out. Someone had let something in. The camp's fragile peace had cracked. The war hadn't started yet, but the battlefield was already chosen. And it was home. Let me know when you're ready for part 2. Mara barely slept. The boy's face haunted her, his smile, his eyes. She was certain she'd never seen him before, but there he was, among the crowd, acting as if he belonged. No child could just appear inside a lockdown, high-surveillance camp without someone letting him in. Unless someone had helped. By sunrise, she and Eli were reviewing camp rosters and head counts. No child matching that description existed in their records. They questioned families. No one reported a missing or unknown child. It was like he'd never been there at all. Could be your mind playing tricks, Eli said, but his voice lacked conviction. It wasn't, Mara replied sharply. He saw me watching him. He smiled. Eli gave her a hard look. Then we find him. Discreetly. While the camp got to work, fortifying fences, checking supplies, and rationing power, Mara moved between tents, scanning faces, watching eyes. If the boy had gotten in, someone must have seen him. Or let him in. Jonas, meanwhile, was inside the generator hut. The power failure still gnawed at him. He wasn't just fixing a system, he was hunting for the how. He pulled the schematics out, retraced every wire, every node. And then he found it. A small, black, smooth device, no larger than a thumbprint, tucked into the wiring near the solar relay. A signal jammer. Military grade. He immediately brought it to Eli. This isn't scavenged tech, Jonas said, placing it on the table. It's clean. New. Someone out there knows exactly how our system works, and how to shut us down. Eli examined it closely. This kind of gear doesn't belong in undead hands. So we're not just dealing with zombies, Jonas muttered. No, Eli said grimly. We're dealing with people who want us vulnerable. Outside, Mara found something else, a torn scrap of fabric caught in the fencing near the east side. It wasn't from any camp-issued clothing. She knelt, examining it, then spotted faint footprints in the soft earth leading back toward the treeline, the same direction as the strange boy had vanished. She called it in. Eli, Mara, and 2 guards followed the trail. They kept low, silent. The air was still, but heavy. Like it was watching them. The trail led about 200 meters into the forest before stopping near a cluster of moss-covered rocks. No signs of movement. No tracks beyond that point. It was as if the person had vanished. Eli raised his hand, signaling the group to hold. Then they heard it, a faint beep. Jonas' voice crackled through Eli's radio. Eli, we've got another jammer. Just found it near the southern fence. Hidden in a birdhouse. Eli's jaw tightened. They're not just watching. They're preparing. Back at the camp, tension thickened. Rumors began to spread, about spies, about betrayal, even about the undead evolving. People started looking at one another with suspicion. Fear was taking root, and it was more dangerous than anything outside the fence. That evening, Mara and Jonas met privately in the tower. They're setting up something big, Mara said. Disabling our power. Mapping our weak spots. And we've got no idea who they are, Jonas added. Zombies don't plan. This feels human. She nodded. Or something worse. What if it's people using the infected as weapons? The thought hung between them like smoke. Later that night, just past midnight, the alarms went off. Screams echoed near the western gate. Eli and the guards rushed in. What they found wasn't an attack, but a warning. A body, propped up against the fence. A man, mid-30s, bloated and pale, but not bitten. No wounds. No blood. In his chest was a note, pinned with a rusted hunting knife. Mara read it aloud under flashlight. You're not alone in these woods. And you're not the only ones who want to survive. The camp went silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The zombies weren't at the fence. But something else was. Something organized. Something watching. And now, they knew the camp had seen them. End of part 2. The body was buried before sunrise. Not out of respect, though some whispered prayers, but to keep morale from crumbling. No one knew who the man was. No one claimed him. And that note? It was now locked away in Eli's office, but its words still echoed through Camp Everest. You're not the only ones who want to survive. By morning, the camp had changed. A thick tension coated the air. People whispered behind closed doors, some packed their bags, others stared too long at the tree line, expecting it to move. Mara stood at the eastern wall again, this time with her rifle. No binoculars. She wanted to feel closer to the woods, to whatever was out there. She wasn't imagining things anymore. Someone had sent a message, and now they were waiting for the camp's answer. Behind her, Eli was assembling a small recon team. Not to fight, yet, but to gather intel. If a group was hiding out there, they needed to know how many, how armed, and how close. He picked 3 people, Mara, for her instincts, Jonas, for his technical mind, and Raya, one of the best trackers the camp had. Quiet, deadly, and fiercely loyal. You'll move at night, Eli told them. 2 kilometers west. Find out who left that body and that message. No confrontation unless it's unavoidable. We need eyes, not casualties. That evening, the 3 slipped through a hidden gate and vanished into the dense, dark woods. The forest felt different beyond the perimeter. Colder. The trees were older, and the silence wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. Every snapped twig sounded too loud. Every bird's wings felt like a warning. Raya led, crouched low, eyes scanning for footprints or disturbed underbrush. Mara watched the treetops, looking for hidden watchers. Jonas brought a handheld thermal scanner, modified to avoid emitting light or sound. They moved for nearly an hour before Raya froze and raised her fist. She pointed to the dirt, fresh tracks. Boots. Recent. More than 1 pair. Maybe 4 or 5. They followed. After 10 more minutes, they saw it, a small outpost, hidden under camo netting and brush. It looked temporary, but deliberate. A single fire burned low, and 2 figures sat around it. Both armed. But the shocking part? They were clean. Not ragged like most survivors. They wore tactical gear, quiet, organized, and clearly part of a trained group. Jonas whispered, military? Ex-military, maybe, Mara replied. Or mercenaries. Raya motioned for them to hold position. She moved forward, silent as a shadow, circling behind the camp. And then, a faint clicking noise. Jonas looked down. A tripwire. Don't, he started, but it was too late. A flare shot into the sky, bathing the forest in red. The 2 figures at the fire jumped to their feet, rifles ready. Run! Mara shouted. The team scattered. Gunshots rang through the trees, not wild but calculated, warnings, not attempts to kill. Still, they ran like their lives depended on it. Maybe they did. Back at Camp Everest, Eli saw the flare from the tower. His heart sank. The recon team was compromised. Mara, Jonas, and Raya returned hours later, breathless and scraped. No one was injured, but they brought confirmation. There's a group out there, Mara said. Armed. Organized. Watching us. They're not infected, Jonas added. There's something worse. And they're not hiding. They want us to know they're out there. Eli didn't speak for a long moment. Then he asked the question no one wanted to ask. Why? No one answered. But that night, while the camp tried to rest, a strange sound drifted in on the wind. It wasn't moaning. It wasn't shuffling. It was music. A radio, somewhere in the woods, blaring an old, cheerful tune. The kind you'd hear in diners decades ago. Scratchy, distorted, and utterly out of place in a world ruled by the dead. Camp Everest stood frozen. Someone out there was playing a game. And they'd just made the first move. End of Part 3. Let me know when you're ready for Part 4. The suspense is just getting started. You said. The music didn't stop. For 3 nights, like clockwork, it played from somewhere deep in the woods. Always the same eerie, old-timey melody, soft and cheerful, a jarring contrast to the silence of the infected world. Some nights it came from the north, others from the east. Always distant, always just out of reach. It wasn't just noise. It was psychological warfare. Inside Camp Everest, sleep became scarce. Parents held their children closer. Guards flinched at shadows. Even the dogs stopped barking. It wasn't fear of zombies anymore. It was fear of the unknown. Something smarter. Something patient. Mara sat in the command tent with Eli and Jonas, the note from the body unfolded in front of them. Jonas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Whoever they are, they're not random survivors. This is a coordinated effort to destabilize us, break us from the inside. Eli tapped the note. You're not the only ones who want to survive. That doesn't sound like a threat. That sounds like a warning. Mara frowned. Or a challenge. That same night, the camp's western fence was breached. Not destroyed, opened. A section of wire had been cleanly cut, folded back, then wired to appear untouched from a distance. Whoever did it was surgical. Professional. And bold. No one was hurt. No supplies stolen. But something was left behind, sitting in the middle of the camp's garden. A gas mask. Black, sleek, with a cracked left lens and the initials K etched into the strap. Raya was the first to notice what was carved faintly into the lens. We see you. Eli doubled the guard. Checkpoints were created between tents. No one moved without ID. Paranoia gripped the camp like a vice. Meanwhile, Jonas worked around the clock to build a jammer detector and signal tracer, something that could pick up the mystery group's transmissions. On the 4th night, it finally pinged. He burst into Eli's tent, breathless. I found it. They're transmitting on a narrow-band radio frequency, military shortwave. I couldn't decrypt the signal, but the location triangulates less than a kilometer from here. Eli stood. Then we go. Tonight. Mara, Jonas, and Raya joined him again. They were tired, but ready. This time, they weren't going to run. They wanted answers. They moved silently through the trees, guided by the faint signal strength on Jonas' scanner. The signal grew stronger with every step. Eventually, they reached a clearing. In the center was an old hunting cabin, half-collapsed, surrounded by motion sensors and a tripwire perimeter. High-tech equipment powered by solar panels glinted under moonlight. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a command post. And standing at the doorway, watching them through the darkness, was a man wearing the same cracked gas mask they had found. He didn't raise a weapon. He raised a hand, in greeting. Mara stepped forward slowly, rifle aimed but finger off the trigger. Who are you? She demanded. The man tilted his head. Then, through a voice modulator, he replied. A survivor. Like you. But smarter. Eli narrowed his eyes. You're the one messing with our power. Playing music. Leaving messages. The man nodded. Correct. We needed to test you. Mara's voice was ice. Test us for what? To see if you're worth saving. A long pause followed. Then the man in the mask turned and disappeared into the cabin, leaving the door slightly open. Light spilled out. Jonas looked to Eli, who gave a subtle nod. Inside, the walls were covered in maps, diagrams, and surveillance images, images of Camp Everest. Dated. Labeled. Marked with circles and lines. On one table lay blueprints. 4 weapons. Fortifications. And plans. Who are you? Mara asked again, eyes scanning everything. The man finally removed his mask. Underneath was a scarred face, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm, focused. My name is Kale. Former reconnaissance for a government unit that no longer exists. What I do now? I gather survivors. The right ones. The smart ones. I build something that can last. And what is that? Eli asked. Kale turned to face them fully. A war camp. Mara stiffened. Against the infected? Kale's eyes narrowed. And the ones who want to control them. The room fell silent. Jonas broke it. You think someone is using the zombies as weapons? Kale nodded. I know they are. I've seen it. And soon, you will too. He walked over to a dusty crate, opened it, and revealed a map of the region. Red markers surrounded Camp Everest like a noose tightening. They're closing in. Not the infected. People. Slavers. Raiders. Scientists playing God. And they're using the undead as pawns. Kale's voice dropped. You think your fence will save you? It won't. But maybe, we can. Mara stepped closer. Why us? Because you haven't broken yet. Kale handed her a second gas mask. You'll need this. Soon. End of part 4. Mara didn't sleep that night. Back in Camp Everest, she sat on the edge of her bunk, Kale's gas mask in her hands, mind racing. His words repeated in her head like a ticking clock. You think your fence will save you? It won't. Across the camp, Eli stood in the command tent with the council. Jonas and Raya flanked him. The revelation of Kale's group had shaken them, but the true shock came from his maps. The red markers weren't random. They were moving. Closer. Coordinated. Zombies don't flank, Jonas said, pacing. They don't time their movements. They don't wait until the camp is sleep-deprived, anxious, and vulnerable. Eli crossed his arms. Which means someone else is steering this. The council wasn't ready to act. Some dismissed Kale as a paranoid ex-soldier. Others believed him but feared provoking a confrontation they couldn't win. Mara stepped into the tent, her voice sharp, then you'll be reacting instead of preparing. And that's how we die. Silence followed. It was decided. The camp would discreetly fortify. Watch rotations were doubled. Emergency bunkers were cleared and stocked. Kale's intel was used to rewire traps at the perimeter and install early warning alarms. Publicly, nothing changed. Privately, the camp was preparing for war. And then, just before dawn, the first shot was fired. It came from the northern tower. A guard spotted movement in the tree line. Just shadows at first, fast, organized. The first one emerged, not stumbling like a zombie, but sprinting. Tactical. He wore scavenged armor and wielded a crude rifle. Behind him came others, 8 of them, moving like a unit. Raiders. The tower guard fired the first warning shot. It dropped one of them, but not before they fired back. Bullets tore through the early morning stillness. Sirens wailed. Eli was already moving. Positions. Non-combatants to the cellar now. Mara sprinted to the wall, rifle slung across her back. Smoke bloomed from a flashbang the raiders tossed over the fence. Then, groaning. Dozens of it. From the rear of the group, a herd began to appear. Not by accident. Herded like livestock. Driven toward the gate by fire and sound. Jonas was right, Mara gasped. They're using them. The raiders had sent zombies first to weaken defenses, then came in behind with firepower. Camp Everest fought back with everything they had. Mara took position near the main barricade, picking off raiders through the scope. Beside her, Raya hurled homemade explosives into the approaching herd. It slowed them, but not enough. Jonas raced through the back tunnels, manually triggering EMP pulses to disable any more hidden jammers. The first breach came just before sunrise. A section of the eastern wall buckled, explosives, planted from within the forest. The infected poured in. Not hundreds. Just dozens. But enough to cause chaos. And among the confusion, a second group of raiders slipped in, moving like ghosts. One of them made it within feet of the food store before a young lookout, barely 16, put him down with a makeshift spear. The camp held its ground, but it was bleeding. Casualties were mounting. Ammo was running low. Eli knew they couldn't sustain another wave. Then, out of the smoke, came Cale. Not alone, 6 of his own fighters moved with him, sweeping through the eastern breach with military precision. They carried silenced weapons, body armor, and something the camp didn't. Training. One by one, the infiltrating raiders were taken out. Cale moved like a ghost, silent and brutal. He didn't need orders. He just knew where to be, and when. Within 15 minutes, the breach was sealed. The infected were neutralized. The surviving raiders fled into the woods. Camp Everest had survived. Barely. Blood covered the soil. Fires crackled against the dawn sky. People wept, hugged, prayed. Mara leaned against the barricade, breathing hard. That wasn't random, she muttered. That was a test. Cale approached, eyes scanning the damage. You passed. But this was the easy part. Eli limped toward him, blood on his sleeve. How many groups like that are out there? Cale didn't hesitate. Too many. He looked around the broken camp. You're strong. But strength won't be enough. Not anymore. Mara looked at him, voice hoarse. Then what will be? Cale stared into the forest, his voice low and deadly calm. Offense. End of Part 5. The dead had barely been burned when Cale called the meeting. It wasn't in the council tent. It wasn't even in Camp Everest. He requested a neutral location, a partially collapsed farmhouse about a half-mile east, surrounded by open ground and stripped of any tactical advantage. No walls, no secrets. Eli, Mara, Jonas, and Raya arrived at dusk, weapons holstered but close. Cale was waiting, standing with his second-in-command, a quiet woman named Lena, her left arm cybernetically enhanced from an old-world military program. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Cale pointed to the charred fields in the distance. That was just a warning shot. The groups I've tracked? They're experimenting. Testing responses. Herding undead, tweaking behavior, even using pheromone lures. The infected aren't wild anymore. They're tools. Weapons. Eli folded his arms. And you think we can fight that? Cale turned slowly. We can do more than fight it. We can hunt it down. Mara raised an eyebrow. With what army? Cale looked at her, then reached into a satchel. He unrolled a weathered map, marked with 6 locations. Other camps. Like yours. Half have already fallen. But there are 2 others, still holding. One in the mountains. One near the coast. If we can link up, form a corridor, we can push back. Take the fight to whoever is behind this. Jonas stepped forward. You're proposing an alliance? Cale nodded. I'm proposing a war network. Shared supplies. Patrol routes. Communication lines. And coordinated strikes. Eli exhaled slowly. You want to turn survivors into soldiers? No, Cale replied. I want to turn targets into resistance. Silence followed. Then Mara said what no one else would. We're in. Eli glanced at her. Then at the others. One by one, they nodded. The pact was sealed. The following days reshaped Camp Everest. Training rotations began. Those who could fight were assigned to Cale's instructors, grizzled survivors who didn't care for politics, only survival. The youngest learned to shoot. The oldest learned to command. Even children were taught silent signals in evacuation drills. Mara led scouting teams to identify weaknesses in the surrounding woods. Tripwires were reinstalled. Watchtowers were reinforced. Radios were fixed and scrambled. Every day became a preparation. Every night, a vigil. And through it all, Cale planned the first strike. It would start with an outpost, identified on one of his patrols weeks ago. A former quarantine station overtaken by one of the rogue factions. The same group that had sent the raiders. Inside that outpost? A cache of modified chemical lures, substances that manipulated zombie behavior. If we let them keep that tech, Cale explained, they'll drive herds at us until we're drowned in bodies. But if we take it, we can flip the board. Raya scouted the site. A crumbling bunker surrounded by woodland. 8 guards. 1 radio tower. 2 visible zombies chained outside, test subjects, half-starved but still twitching. The plan was simple. Jonas would jam communications just long enough to prevent a distress call. Mara would lead a team in from the north, drawing fire. Cale and Raya would flank from the east and eliminate key personnel. Once the site was secure, Eli would move in with a recovery squad to extract the chemical crates. The night of the strike, the air was thick with tension. Mara crouched behind a ridge, eyes on the outpost. She spoke into her comm position set. Jonas's voice crackled back. Comm towers are dark. Cale's voice followed. Execute. Mara's team moved first, noisy on purpose. Gunfire rang out. The guards scrambled. That's when Cale's team slipped through the eastern trees, silent as ghosts. Within seconds, 2 guards fell. A third was incapacitated. A fourth ran. Raya dropped him before he reached the forest. Inside the bunker, Cale found them, crates marked with biohazard warnings and strange symbols. He popped one open. Glass vials. Faintly glowing. Some were red. Others, blue. Jonas arrived with Eli, inspecting the contents. If these do what I think they do, we can control where herds go. Drive them into our enemy. But they weren't alone. A voice came from deeper inside the bunker. Garbled, through a speaker system. You don't understand what you've taken. Cale froze. Who is this? I tried to warn you, the voice continued. This isn't just war. It's containment. You think these lures are weapons? They're barriers. You've just stolen the lock to a door you don't want to open. The voice cut out. Then, a quiet hiss. Hidden vents releasing gas. Alarms blared. Move! Cale barked. They fled the bunker as clouds of pale mist leaked from the vents. The chained zombies outside went berserk, howling, snapping, pulling at their restraints like animals possessed. Eli glanced back as they retreated. We just made ourselves a target. Cale's jaw tightened. No. We just made ourselves a threat. End of Part 6. The chemical crates sat in the center of Camp Everest, locked in reinforced containers, watched day and night by armed guards. No one touched them, not even Jonas, without authorization. Since the bunker raid, strange things had been happening. Zombies had always been aggressive. But this was different. They stopped wandering aimlessly and began gathering, in dozens, then hundreds, just beyond the perimeter. Not attacking. Not moving. Just waiting. Raya called it the staring wall. Every morning, she'd go up the tower and find them lined up like statues. Silent. Still. Watching. We didn't just poke the hive, Jonas muttered. We cracked it open. Cale reviewed the footage from his helmet cam the night of the bunker raid. Freeze frame after freeze frame of the glowing vials. The biohazard symbols. The warning message. You've stolen the lock to a door you don't want to open. What door? Mara asked, leaning over his shoulder. Cale looked at her grimly. A door someone was desperate to keep shut. That night, a scout didn't return. Eli sent out a recovery team. They found the man near the riverbed, strung upside down from a tree. Not killed by infected, executed. Clean cut across the throat. A message carved into the tree bark behind him. You were warned. Jonas pieced it together. They didn't just modify the infected, he said. They created a control method, pheromone-based, maybe radio-enhanced. Whatever it is, the chemicals we stole were keeping a specific kind of zombie in line. Raya frowned. Specific kind? Jonas nodded. I think we're seeing something new. A mutation. Smarter. Coordinated. Hive-like. Cale didn't flinch. I've seen them once before. 2 years ago. In what used to be Denver. One led a herd right into a fortified city. They opened gates. Set traps. They're not animals. Eli's voice was cold. Then what are they? Cale looked toward the treeline. Soldiers. The camp didn't sleep that night. Patrols doubled. Evacuation drills were rehearsed silently in the dark. And then, without warning, the waiting wall of undead dispersed. Vanished. At first, it looked like good news. Then the seismic monitors lit up. Jonas had installed them weeks earlier, designed to detect mass movement underground or nearby. One by one, red signals appeared. Mara stared at the map. That's a tunnel network. Raya leaned over the screen. They're not retreating. They're burrowing. Cale stepped forward. They're coming under the walls. Eli's voice rang across the tent. Sound the alarm. Light the flares. Wake the camp. Now. The first breach came from below the medical tent. A sinkhole opened up and 5 infected exploded out of it, faster than anything the camp had seen before. They didn't bite. They stabbed with sharpened bones. One medic was dead before the alarm finished ringing. Cale and Mara were already there, rifles hot. The infected wore tattered remnants of lab coats and restraints, test subjects once. Soldiers now. The second breach came 15 minutes later. Not from the ground, but from the air. A drone, crudely built but functional, dropped canisters of gas over the northwest quarter of the camp. The same gas they'd seen at the bunker. Within moments, the infected broke through that section, moving straight for the chemical crates. They're trying to take them back. Jonas shouted, firing from the armory roof. Raya and Eli led the countercharge. Bottlenecks were formed in the alleyways. Traps were triggered. One crate was moved to a secure tunnel beneath the command tent. Mara saw one of the new infected up close, a tall, thin humanoid with pale gray skin and black veins. Its eyes were not dead. They were alert. Studying. She shot it twice in the chest. It barely flinched. Cale had to bring it down with an axe to the neck. We're not just fighting zombies anymore, he growled. Eli dragged a wounded guard behind cover. Then what the hell are we fighting? Cale looked at the carnage around them, the coordination, the strategy, the desperation to retrieve the vials. He exhaled. We're fighting the next generation. The attack lasted just under an hour. Long enough to wound. To test. To send a message. Camp Everest survived again, but barely. 37 injured. 9 dead. 3 missing. 1 chemical crate, gone. Taken in the chaos. Later that night, they found a message broadcast on an intercepted signal. Jonas played it on loop. You've taken what does not belong to you. You think you're saving the world. But what you hold is a leash. And something very old is on the other end. The transmission ended with a single word. Release. The council met again, this time in the lowest level of the emergency bunker. Mara slammed her fist on the table. We can't just wait anymore. We can't keep letting them pick the time and place. Cale nodded. Then we strike first. Follow the tunnels. Find the source. Eli looked around the room. If we do this, there's no going back. We go underground, We don't stop until it's over. One way or the other. Mara's voice was steady. Then let's finish it. End of Part 7. The final confrontation is coming. Let me know when you're ready for Part 8, the final descent, where all secrets are revealed, and the future of humanity is decided beneath the ground. The tunnel mouth yawned open like a wound beneath the old ruins west of Camp Everest. A dozen survivors stood at its edge, armored in scavenged gear, weapons tight in their hands. No one spoke. No speeches. No promises. Just nods. Cale led the way. Behind him followed Mara, Eli, Raya, Jonas, and a hand-picked team, those who had seen too much to walk away now. Above ground, Everest's remaining defenders watched the forest. Below, the strike team disappeared into darkness. Jonas activated his wrist light. Signals weak. GPS dead. Radio contact may cut out in deeper levels. That's not a bug, Cale muttered. That's design. The tunnels were unlike anything natural. Smooth walls. Reinforced with rusted steel and ancient tech. This wasn't a mine. It was a facility. One built long before the world ended, before the outbreak. The team moved in silence, noting strange symbols etched into the walls. Glyphs. Biohazard signs. Military logos half buried beneath mold. Then, the first room. A circular chamber filled with cryopods. Most were shattered. The ones that remained held things, not quite human. Not fully dead. Preserved in fluid, eyes open, unblinking. Watching. Mara stepped back. They were trying to make them controllable. Jonas scanned one pod. Not trying. Succeeding. These aren't infected. They're prototypes. Eli checked his rifle. Whatever they were building down here, they weren't planning on sharing it with the world. Further in, they reached a sealed vault door. Behind it, a soft pulsing hum. Cale pressed a gloved hand to the scanner. It sparked, and then, surprisingly, unlocked. Raya raised her weapon. That was too easy. Cale nodded grimly. They want us to come in. The door creaked open. Inside was a command center, long abandoned but still operational. Screens flickered with static. One by one, they lit up with grainy footage of the world above, camps, survivors, infected, herds. And then, a face. Pale. Thin. Eyes black as obsidian. Not infected. Not alive either. You found your way back. Impressive. Mara stepped forward. Who are you? A guardian, the figure replied, left behind to prevent the failure of a project humanity never should have started. Cale narrowed his eyes. The Hive Protocol. The figure nodded. When the virus first appeared, the response wasn't eradication, it was control. Leashes were developed. Organisms enhanced. Intelligence was gifted. But every system breaks eventually. The Hive outgrew the leash. Now it wants everything. Eli's voice was low. And you've been helping it. I've been slowing it. With lures. With balance. You disrupted that. Jonas spoke up. Then help us fix it. There is no fixing, the figure said. There is only containment. Or extinction. Behind the team, another door opened. Footsteps echoed. Infected, but different. They walked upright, methodically. Their eyes shone dimly with bioluminescent light. Behind them, the Hive General. A towering creature, part flesh, part bone, all rage. It looked human once. Now it was a monster built for war. Cale didn't hesitate. Open fire. The final battle began. Gunfire thundered in the tight corridor. Mara and Raya took high ground, dropping infected before they got too close. Jonas hurled a homemade EMP, frying two drones that had emerged from the wall. Cale met the Hive General head-on, blades drawn. The two clashed in a blur of speed and fury. Steel against claw. Blood sprayed the walls. Eli took a hit to the shoulder but kept firing. The command center began to collapse, wires sparking, alarms screaming. And then, Jonas reached the central console. This is it. A self-destruct trigger. Buried in their failsafe. 5-minute countdown. Cale kicked the general back, staggering. Everyone move. They ran. Mara grabbed Eli. Raya covered Jonas. The infected surged behind them, but the tunnel was collapsing. With a final leap, the team made it to the surface just as the earth beneath them erupted. A plume of smoke and ash towered into the sky. The ground shook for a full minute. Trees cracked. Birds fled. And the hive? Gone. 3 days later. Camp Everest held a ceremony, not for victory, but survival. The dead were honored. The lost remembered. The chemical vials were gone, destroyed in the blast. The tunnels sealed forever. The infected that remained seemed disoriented. Scattered. Whatever intelligence once drove them was fractured, maybe even destroyed. Eli stood before the camp. His arm in a sling. His voice strong. We didn't win a war. We stopped an apocalypse. And now, we build. Cale didn't stay long after that. He disappeared into the trees without a word. Mara watched him go, rifle slung across her back. He's not done, she whispered. Raya nodded. Neither are we. Epilogue. Far from Camp Everest, beneath another ruin, a screen flickered to life. A voice, familiar, crackled from a hidden speaker. Hive Node 7, destroyed. Command signals, lost. Protocol status, fragmented. Initiating fallback routine. A nearby pod opened. Mist spilled into the room. Inside, a new shape stirred. Its eyes opened. And smiled. End of Part 8. The END, or is it? Let me know if you'd like a Season 2 outline, spin-off ideas, or a cinematic script adaptation.